que não há mais água? Bom, vou ver.
Eu tenho fechado para o PA, portanto, podes abrir à vontade. Será que ele estava a ir para o HDMI em vez de sair o mini jack?
Como assim? Ah, ok. Não, pois, isto convém sair do mini jack?
Tiraram o mini jack, foi? Não lembro do computador de ontem.
É, mas tiraram o mini jack. Agora.
Então, ora testa agora, já deve dar.
Já vou confirmar.
A Helena está à procura do som. Mas em todo caso, nós fazemos depois do Ibrahim, ele apresenta, abrimos as questões logo e fazemos assim uma pausazinha só para fazer a transição. Né? Isso nessa altura também conseguimos ver. Eu tenho que tirar isto aqui da Artemis.
A Mónica diz que vai ver o Ibrahim e que depois não se importa que seja a segunda, que disse a Artemis, depois uma Mónica, depois a Susana.
Ok, então vamos lá falar.
aqui. Tem que ser aqui. Aí já está a ser. Está a ser aqui. Eu já sei. Porque eu não sei para lá.
Then the top one, let's put plus in brackets. To be able to fly this one, because of the nature of it, it has to move, like it has to move forward. You get it? To gain momentum before it flies up. You understand? So that's what we call a pitch.
Não há outro sítio. Aquilo é de Paula. Tem que ser nesta. Vamos ver se é que está ligado.
You understand? So
Mas aliás,
once you pitch, so this way you're going to do a positive pitch. You're going to pitch in a positive way. You get it? So that's what we have here. You see pitch.
Yes.
So prop pitch. You get it? High RPM prop pitch. So this one will pitch. You get it? And then over here, you throttle. You push this one. So once you begin to push this one is supposed to go slow. So once you begin to push this one,
Today is the last day of the Textile Talk. We had a really interesting day yesterday, all day long. It was a great opportunity to hear the key speakers, Svenja from Sweden and Annie Wilson from the United States. We have different schools all around the country also presenting their projects, and we had a really interesting debate. And we hope to continue today. So thank you so much to be here and with us in this opportunity to debate these issues. Well, we invited Ibrahim Mahama as the invited artist to make a site-specific intervention in Contextile Biennale in this year. And it was an incredible opportunity to work and develop a project that was in two parts, one intervention in the medieval wall and another intervention in an indoor space in an old factory where there was built an intervention installation with looms. So it was an incredible opportunity to work with Ibrahim, and thank you so much to give us also and this opportunity and to accept this invitation. So Ibrahim was born in Tamale, Ghana. He lives and works there, and his work is represented in several international exhibitions. In Sydney Biennale, in Venice Biennale, in Documenta Castle, in Whitechapel, more recently, all around the world, he has his pieces and his works represented in institutional places and also galleries. And in March 2019, Ibrahim started the Savannah Center for Contemporary Art in Tamale, Ghana, followed by the opening of Red Clay nearby in September 2020. Compromise of exhibition spaces, facilities for research and for artist residencies. Both locations represent Mahama's contribution to the development and expansion of the art scene. So this is deeply connected with this artist's work, and so I invite Ibrahim to make his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I have a bit of a flu, so I might not be as efficient as I am usually, but I try. So thank you very much, Susanna, for the lovely introduction, and thank you all very much for being here. It's always lovely to be in Guimarães, as they say. I come from the background of art. I studied art in art school in Ghana, in Kumasi, a very traditional art school. And our arts curriculum for many years was based on the old hand and eye British curriculum. And there was a lot of professors who had trained within this system who were very much holding on to that. And that was the only means in which artists could practice. But also there were other professors who wanted to somehow change and also expand the forms within that. So architecture, philosophy, and every other thing became really important with regards to how we could think about art. So as a student, we were heavily encouraged to go to the city or the town, as we say it, to look for ideas like market women and how they decide to arrange things within the market spaces, going to villages, seeing how people live, how they take care of their spaces, the relationship basically between ordinary people and their environment, because in art, that is what it's supposed to be. And art always borrows from the idea of precarity, but at the end of the day, I don't think contemporary art does quite enough to be able to bridge those gaps. So today, there's an idea I've been working with, basically part of my PhD, which was based on the idea of excavating, like artists as some kind of archaeologists or time travelers in a way, but being these kinds of archaeologists that allows us to, for collective like exhumation of time, of history and all that. So I've been collecting a lot of different materials from different areas, mostly from villages, from under people's beds. I'm interested in like historical sites, buildings. One of these old buildings that was built by Eastern European architects in the post-independent era. During COVID, when I bought it and we excavated it, we realized that there was a huge colony of bats living inside the building, and I decided that we should leave the bats in it. So I've been really thinking about the idea of the bats as these protagonists, as characters who are somehow bringing us to a point of realization of the idea of exhumation. So these are some of the cartoon characters that I've been working with some of my colleagues, like rethinking about the relationship between spaces, very common spaces under beds versus, let's say, much bigger spaces like the bunker of the silo. So the idea of the exhumation is quite very important in a sense that I think about it in different forms and relations. So in here, I also borrow from some of the old infrastructure by the British, looking at like the paradoxes within these spaces, trees growing within trains, within chimneys, and trying to use that as ideas to build new works. For instance, in New York, in relation to the High Line and also the Statue of Liberty, referring to the torch and other things like that. But in a way, when these ideas are borrowed and they go to, let's say, the West, it also comes back to Africa again. So we're dealing almost with the idea of repatriation, but not just in terms of physical objects, but also in terms of, like, let's say, ideology, in terms of courage, in terms of spirit, because we actually want to be able to produce work that transforms another generation. So this is my studio in Tamale, Red Clay. I started building it in 2015 as a home to live in. So literally this is where I live, but I've never used it to make art physically. So there's always the question about what is really the artist studio. So I really was starting to think about it, that's the precarity of it, you know, as an artist and how we work and what we're trying to do. So when I started building the studio, maybe, okay, is there a pointer? No. Or I can just point. Yeah. Yeah, no, it doesn't matter. So in the image, you'll find that we have the main studio space, which is the front one. So that's the main studio space. That's where I live. And also we have the studio spaces that you see more images of it later. And there is an archive space there, which has archival materials from the railways and other spaces that I've collected. We have the Parliament of Ghosts, which is supposed to be this classroom pedagogical space. We also have like a film hall. We have a library and a photography studio, which is an old photographer studio that I bought in Berlin a few years ago when I was doing a residency there and brought it to Ghana. That's analog technology. And we have residency spaces that I've been building for a few years now, hoping we'll finish it next year. And we have a greenhouse that we also started building last few months. So the idea of the greenhouse is to expand the notion of the contemporary art space and the artist studio. What does it mean for the artist to be able to use the greenhouse as a studio space? That's the idea of going back into ecology, food, growing old spices, which are in these rural areas, because the studio is in the village. And a lot of the food that they eat there in the city, we don't eat those foods because we like imported food from China, spices, things like that. And we also have a public kitchen that we're working on that allows us to be able to use the content of the greenhouse to be able to go into experimental cooking and also sharing recipes, ideas. And the airplanes are used for classroom projects, which you'd see. And we also have the Archaeology Museum, which is named after one old man called Ben Saibu. I started talking to him when SECA opened, and the idea, because he had grown up in a time where as children, maybe in the 40s, they used to find small terracotta figurines when they went to the farm in the village. But in time, they realized that there was a huge wealth of archaeological materials which were buried in the ground, a lot of which had been taken by the British, but also a lot of which had been taken by archaeological students from the university. So my position as an artist is that how do we recontextualize the artist studio? So when that building was made, I decided to convert the building into an archaeological museum. That's honoring the life's work of this man, because he's grown, imagine he's like late 70s, and he's met every possible president in Ghana, but no one has ever been interested in his research or the work that he does. And he's a lawyer by training. So you can imagine how difficult it is if you're a lawyer and you're interested in culture from that point of view. So the excavation is not just, the archaeological material is not just the objects, but it's also the relationship between different generations and how, as an artist, my transformation, maybe through philosophy and others, or maybe through the work of Karl Marx, could be a means in which we go back into a certain timeline and then we re-excavate things. So that's maybe open next year. And the idea of the archaeological museum is to transform it into a space where kids can come and can excavate objects within the museum and can bury things, can produce things, things like that. So starting from 24, we're hoping to have an art school connected to architecture, engineering, and other things. So this is the site around the studio. So in the village, so there are different lands that I also bought, because in Ghana, the lands belong to the chiefs, not the government. So you have to buy the land from the chief. But the chiefs always reappropriate the land. They always rezone, and then they sell the land when the government doesn't come to build a school. So I like the idea that we need urban spaces, we need parks, because there's nothing in the city. Yeah. So we always, yeah, anyway, so I thought it would be interesting to somehow create this relationship between the forest areas, which you'd see later, which are these sacred forests back from the last few centuries, which has like, which are burial grounds and things like that, and connecting it to the studio space, the institutional space, factory spaces, farms, and other ideas. So these are some of the sketches and drawings that I make from time to time. So this is, these are images of Dawson, Mr. Dawson, who passed away last 2 years of COVID. He was the first artist that we worked with when the studio was made into an institutional space. So hence, relooking at this idea of the excavation process I was talking about. And we also have Ajimona Say, who is an artist that we worked with. And that's Ben Saibu, the lawyer that I was referring to, holding a book that he published with a German institution, not a Ghanaian institution. So that thing, that it's always, for us, it's very important that, for me, I always wish that from the very place that we come from, there are a lot of people who commit their will to doing things. And sometimes setting up institutions could be the way in which we somehow are able to bridge those. And it's interesting that both Dawson and, though they are of the same generation, they never met before. So through this project, it was a way also to connect them. At the very time, it was almost 6 months, Dawson passed 6 months after they had this encounter. So my colleague, who is the artistic director of the institution, Salam Koji, we convert, the idea of thinking of the institution as a pedagogical platform. So through the artist's works, we were able to do workshops and all kinds of things. So Dawson did a lot of workshops with the school kids. And it's very difficult to get these two generations together. So these are some of the exhibitions that we've done in the SCCA. So the Savannah Center is separate from the Red Clay, which you just saw. So this is a very different building at a very different place. And these are also, the idea of the excavation is also the thing that I come back to, the idea of building physically, because the people who built these spaces, in terms of the labor, is very interesting how within the contemporary art or modern art, they are very much disconnected from it. But if you're building, let's say, a studio or an architectural form within a village, how does it transform the labor within these spaces? It's a very important question, because there are different forms of intelligence in the world. It's because when in contemporary or modern art, as soon as the painting is done and it goes into the white cube space, then suddenly it becomes like this very autonomous special object. Whereas there is what about the people who built MoMA, or the people who built, are they allowed to even use their own labor in order to be able to reflect upon the condition of art within this? So Caretaker, who also works doubles as one of the workers building the space, it's interesting how he's able to offer tours to the school children in the community using his own experiences in the local language. Because me, I was born in Tamale, but when I speak the language, the kids laugh most of the time. So to save myself the embarrassment, I prefer that someone else does it. And his son, who was only 5 years old when the institution was being built, because he's always there, it's in the village, so he's always coming there with his father. And with time of spending with him going around, he's come to know the collection and everything so much. So when we have other kids come into the space, I like that he takes them around, because when kids are sharing information with their fellow kids, it's much more believable, you know, than me talking, because I always seem like an alien in a way. Yeah, and it's not very easy. Yeah, in terms of like this kind of artist image, artist cult in a way, because a lot of people always say in Tamale, but this guy, he's not from here, because they don't believe that someone comes from a place like that with all the difficulties, and yet they invest so much time and energy and thinking into creating this kind of work. But to demystify it, we have to find other channels which somehow expand upon the ideas and ideals of it in a way. So the excavation process goes in many different ways. So this is the silo I was talking about, working with young people, young men and women to excavate these buildings and to give it a very different context. So these are some of the buildings. So as an artist, I think about all these things as both sculptural and other forms that we can work with. But I'm also just not interested in us working there, but also interested in the idea of creating witnesses. So the kids, the school programs that we do, they are in the construction sites and they witness a lot of these things that happen. And through that, we have conversations. It's very important. Like, that is one of the things that architecture always disconnects. So, and we have the kids in the airplanes with the classroom projects where we do drone technologies, other things, coding, robotics. So using the idea of art to somehow penetrate these forms, and looking at the relationship between that and, for instance, the bats living in the void of the silo, because it's very important to think about the relationship between different life forms and ecosystems. So history is very important. It's material to work with. So I've also gone back to the history of the railway when the British brought the trains for colonial excavations, exploitation, things like that. But images are somehow interesting because sometimes you can find one specific thing about it is that sense of courage. People have the courage to do bad things or terrible things, but you can also use the idea of courage in order to be able, as a gift, to transform. So I go back to these images and I borrow that idea of idea of courage in a way from these images. And I work with like local people to collect these objects, negotiate, buy, transport them across the country, great distances, creating different relationships, like almost very performative in a way. Yeah, and it's interesting how, like, within these images, within these times, you find that a lot of the children who encounter this, it's almost like a dream, you know, that you never, because these things only happen in like blockbuster movies when there's a plane crashing or landing on the road or things like that, which allows you to, it allowed them in a moment to be able to re-look at the relationship between these objects. Like, you know, like there is no relationship between an airplane, technological form, in relation to a truck or bicycle, which they are very familiar with, or a tree. And I like the idea that we could collapse those things through these gestures. So I spend a lot of time doing these photographic works, also tracing and looking at the relationship between the different forms. And once we have these, they become playgrounds. We can use the cockpits as classrooms. The kids can play within them. And this is one of the planes from the old Soviet era. So it was made in Poland, is this Antonov aircraft. And it was given to us as a gift by this Swiss guy who brought it to Ghana to fly as a hobby. But in Ghana, come on, like, who flies a plane as a hobby? So he was not given the permit. And then when I met him, he was like, oh, wow, I met a Ghanaian who is very interested in this. So he gave it to me as a gift. So that's the thing. It's not a white and black thing. It's just a human thing that we're trying to aspire for, you know. So, yeah, so again, looking at the occupation, so we can occupy the forest that I was talking about, sacred areas, and the inside of the classroom, just as the kids occupy, like, let's say, old abandoned projects, and then they go there to play and things like that. So I like the idea that the crisis, or I'm trying to phrase it well. You know, we are a generation that has been born into debt, financially, and also ideologically. So it's very important that we somehow use that as a means of, I see it almost like as a wormhole in a way. Yeah, because most often we see it as a condition. But for me, the condition is material that we can use in order to be able to transform the way that the world functions. So I go back again into the building processes of the institution. That's where my interest mostly comes in when it comes to architecture and all that. So the kids playing within the site, excavating the greenhouse and using the idea of the greenhouse, the soil, to create other materials. So the exhumation process is a very political one. And assemblyman again, taking the women in the community through the institution. So it's created a whole new culture in terms of how people relate to culture, to art, to the way they occupy space, because traditionally, because these institutions didn't exist, it was not possible to even think about it. So I like going back and forth in between the different like archival materials from the railway, the British, together with the Ghanaians who were working in these spaces, which heavily contributed to the independence that we had in 1957 in relation to school kids now, who we've brought some of the archives into this space, because 100 years in between, you never imagined that there would have been another form of ideological, let's say, migration. Sorry. And yeah, so one of the interesting things is also like local people. Like we have these Indian chuk-chuks in Ghana, and the drivers, they always bring people there. And sometimes when they come, they are really, like, wow, like there are places like this in our city or village and we didn't know. So one of them, interestingly, he went back home after he was like, I'm closed for the day. And he went back home and he brought all the children in his house. And in Ghana, yeah, when in your house, these are the children there. Like we have like small football leagues in our families, you know. So he brought all the children from his house. And these chuk-chuks are supposed to take just 3 people. But I can imagine all these kids are packed into it. So the idea that they even put it's like they risk their lives just to be able to access something, which is, it's really interesting in terms of what happens when there's beginning to be some kind of transformation within, like, let's say, within the world, and how people take ownership of it, and how people want to access it and also meet it at some point. So these are some of these kids also who would come with their schools and use the building space as a classroom. So it's not as if the space is done and then we put a ribbon and we cut it. No. As we're building, we are confronting the building process. So we're using it. You can see the bricklayers even laying the bricks on the floor whilst they're sitting on the floor and then using it as a classroom space. Assemblyman again, and I like these relationships. Like recently when we transformed the parliament into a cornfield, it's a question concerning the form of art in itself, because at the end of the day, we ask ourselves, what's it art? Yeah, is it the final thing? Is it a process, as I was talking about? So what's the relationship between him taking the community through the archive versus working with the community to build the greenhouse or to plant corn within the parliament? So there are questions regarding the form that art takes, or how we are able to transfer different materials and how people occupy these differently. The kids from the rural areas and things like that. So this is the last project that we did in the Parliament of Ghost, where we occupied the entire space with plants, and it could allow us to be able to re-navigate the space very differently. So both things that are living, things that are dry and dead. These are corn bales, corn wheat bales that we gather, and then we use them almost also as witnesses, just as the kids were there. So you can also see that they become witnesses to the process of the building, and combining like archival materials of like the kids in the space together with like the British trains, as I was talking about. So I like going back in between the histories and also the ghostly image, black and white, of the workers from the railway in relation to this. And this is an image of a young man, making paint in an old paint factory in the post-independence era in Ghana. So looking at that image in relation to this contemporary time that we're living in, you can see that there's a scale to the end, and there's this old scale from Birmingham, the ivory scale. And in Ghana, post-independence, a lot of things were discarded, destroyed, but I go around and I collect things because I'm interested in the spectre within these and how that somehow haunts us. So these are also some of the old chairs that were made by the British in the early 20th century in Ghana, which were used mostly in villages. I remember when we were kids, if you had one in your home, the only one that sat on it was the father. No one else sat in that chair. Yeah, if you wanted to have an issue, you'd sit in that chair. So I really like the idea that there are physical embodiments of ghosts within these objects, which within the contemporary people it's not important because my father is dead, I don't need this object. But there is something really pertinent about it in relation to how it occupies institutional spaces differently. Yeah. So these also looking at it in relation to livestock, other forms, in relation to the bats and all that, in relation to gatherings and like talking about ideas. So these are the last parts. But one of the things that is important to note is also like the courage I was talking about. So a lot of these teachers who would bring their school kids to the institution, there are also people who just like suddenly they're like, oh wow, like it's really interesting because in my city or in Ghana till now, I've never even had a representative from the cultural ministry visit the institution before, you know. Not even my local MP or assemblyman is interested in engaging with the institution and what it has to offer. But you realize that ordinarily teachers, they become the true heroes at the end of the day because they are interested in how they can shift the perspective of their students, knowing the condition that they occupy. So I really like this idea that through teaching or using the whole research process as pedagogy with my colleagues Esinam, who both he and Selom also studied in the university. Selom and I are in the PhD program. Esinam finished the undergrad some years ago. So the idea that we could transform this, and also we just don't do in the class, in the plane, we can also go to the classrooms physically in the villages and also somehow bring that spirit there. Or we can be in the schools whilst the kids also come to the institution whilst we engage them in different technological forms. Yeah, so I go with my colleagues around and we do different forms. And that's Latif that I was showing before. This is from many years ago. This is from COVID time. So we had a lot of different classes where he was teaching, he was trying to like pass on some of the ideas that he had to the other kids within the community. So I think that that's when education matters the most. The idea of allowing young people to realize that we have to take responsibility now. It's not as if, oh, when you're older one day you change the world. No, yeah, we have to. Because there's always a tendency of thinking that children will become responsible when they grow up. Yeah, but we've all seen how they grow up to become irresponsible because of the system that we created for them. So these are just images. So even my drawings that I make collages, I use all of them as ways to teach, to allow them to access materials, pedagogy, like in very different ways. So occupying the space, artist works that we commission as part of large-scale exhibition. This is a Ghanaian artist, Tracy Thompson, quite young. She's doing a PhD at the university. And she works with food. She makes these paintings which look like landscapes and all that. And in the process, we transformed the institution into a laboratory where she can cook within the exhibition space. I remember we were working with a Western institution for an exhibition, and they said, oh, you cannot cook in the museum. But we can cook in the museum because we are coming from ground zero. So I like the idea that when you start from nothing and you have the benefits of hindsight with the, as I was talking about, of the archaeologist, of the time traveler, at least you're a bit more comfortable, like, come on, it's okay, nothing will happen. You know, so yeah, so this is the same work by the artist Tracy, which again we showed in Red Clay, one of the last exhibitions that we did. So we do a lot of workshops, so it's food. So even the conversation around composition of, let's say, different materials become important. But I also like, one of the most important things that I like is the transformation of, let's say, the elderly, like parents, because a lot of parents would bring their kids there, or a lot of young people would just come with their colleagues. This was during the height of the pandemic when we opened this exhibition with Ajiman Osei, which was curated by my colleagues in Ghana. And I really like the idea that through these different institutional building and contexts, it somehow transformed the way that people would normally relate to culture or architecture, specific forms of architecture and all that, whether it is within that white cube space or within this old abandoned building silo which has the bats in it, and how these young men take courage in order to be able to do things that in politics it would never happen, because no one has the courage to confront the specters of history, because we just want to forget and move on. But that's where the world doesn't seem to have any sense of transformation. So this is the last image, I promise. And this one, this one is a very important image because I took this picture 10 years ago. And 10 years ago when I was a student in art school, in doing my master's degree, I would go around the market spaces trying to negotiate with the market women to collect these old objects to make art out of research. And a lot of them found it very suspicious. A young man doing his master's degree, what do you want in a market space? Yeah, because there's always this there's a mistrust between people who are educated versus people who are in the market, because we always think, oh, they use all these books that they read in order to scam us, to extract from us, things like that. Whereas I'm saying, no, I'm an artist. I'm just interested in this. Of course, economics and everything is implicated within the work that I do, but basically just interested in how they transform these materials. Because with the bags that contain the commodities, when they are worn out, they take parts of their old cloth and then they use it to stitch the bags and all that. So I'm really interested in how, like the work in the design school, where with the institute, with the smocks, with the textile, how the connection between the body in relation to these materials and how we could transform that. And at some point, the women started to trust me, and just the simple idea of exchange, giving them new bags and taking these old bags from these spaces, became the starting point in which I could somehow go back to this whole archaeological process that I've been talking about in the last several minutes. So I really like the idea that if I could go back to this very moment as an artist, I never imagined that I would have done all this work, connected that to airplanes or trains or to archives or things like that. So I like the idea that it looks like a very simple image, but all the things that I spoke about from the beginning are implicated within this image, because without this image, none of that would have happened. And that's where, that has always been that kind of a disconnect between modern contemporary art and the reality of the world. Because we always think that, oh, it's like once we borrow from this and we make art, then art has this kind of autonomy. But no, at the end of the day, it's possible that the work that we're doing now through this image will come back and transform the trajectory of their descendants. So in the future, we are not able to produce an image like this because these conditions, the idea is to eradicate this image and the condition in the future. So it's a paradox. So thank you. I will leave it here. I'm sure later on we can have a bit of conversation, but it's a pleasure to be able to share this little work that I've done with you. Thank you very much.
Aš neatsimenu šitam telefone direktorių kompį, jungiau tik kada nors.
And it's going to talk about the experience of the planes. So please.
Yeah, it's not showing. Yeah, no, but it's not showing. Okay. No, some of it doesn't have sound. The beginning doesn't have sound, so it's fine. Yeah. Yeah, so last time I was here, I wasn't able to share some of the videos of looking at the relationship between landscapes and things like that, or the labor process of going into a lot of the work that I'm making. So you can see this young man at the top, almost like a cowboy. He's the conductor of the truck that is carrying the things. So I like this idea that we're able to, so I have the drone. That's how I started teaching the drone at the institution, because I was using the drone to film the work that I was doing in relation to other things. So we would transport these airplanes by road from Accra all the way to Tamale, which is about 700 kilometers. And I really like the idea of the relationships that were created within that time, and also using the drone to somehow map these things, looking at the relationship between that and the river. So this is the White Volta. It's the river that goes to the dam in Accra, Akosombo, that's where the hydroelectric dam is. So so I remember when we were doing this transport, it took a long time, but I had to orchestrate, like direct. Sometimes you go there, you plan the shots, because you only have one shot, in a way. So it's really interesting how you can look at it like in mobile. You never saw these kinds of things. So that's what I was talking about. the idea that through the work that I do, it can somehow transform the way that young people think about how they think about form. And this was in Tamale. There was a plane that crash landed at the airport several years ago, and I bought it from the company to transport it to the studio. And it was a whole task because we had to turn off the electricity in the whole city. We had to work with the police and the army. We had to block the streets. So in order to do a lot of these things, sometimes, and as an artist, people will think, oh, but the artist is just supposed to make the paintings that hangs on the wall or things like that. So how to orchestrate all of this within the context of the institution was one thing. Yeah, so these are old footages. I made this a long time ago. Of looking at the relationship between the space, the building in relation to, let's say, the landscape around it. Yeah. And what you see on the screen in terms of the land is only 5% of the land that the institution occupies. So it's a very big infrastructure that I invested into because I was more or less interested in it.
The first one, this one is throttle, so top and down throttle. Okay. The top arrow, the down arrow, throttle, THROTTLE. So if the drone is this way, if you do this, or if it's moving this way, it means that you are rotating or you are yawing. Are you okay?
Yeah.
And if it's moving this way, it's the same thing. So this one is positive, this one is negative.
Yes.
Are you okay?
Yes.
So yaw is rotating to the left or to the right. You understand?
Yes.
So that one to negative to the left, positive to the right. Let's draw the remote controllers. Let's draw. No. Just do the simple box. Yeah. Rectangle. Yeah. Then the top one, let's put a plus in bracket. To be able to fly this one, because of the nature of it, it has to move. Like it has to move forward. You get it? Yes. To gain momentum before it flies up. You understand? Yes. So that's what we call the pitch. You understand?
Yes.
So once you pitch, so this way you're going to do a positive pitch. You're going to pitch in a positive way. You get it? So that's what we have here. You see pitch.
Yes.
So prop pitch. You get it? High RPM prop pitch. So this one will pitch. You get it? And then over here, you throttle. You push this one. So once you begin to push this one is supposed to go slow. So once you begin to push this one, the front will lift and then it will go up. So slowly, just watch here. Now we are safe in the air, so slowly move this one. Then let's add this one to it. Now slowly. Now it's facing us from where it is, because we can see ourselves from somewhere here. So when we stand behind it. So now we are going to bring it closer to us. But then we have to use the camera to locate us. This is where we are. Understand? So we bring it down and forward at the same time. We go up and then we yaw at the same time. You see?
Thank you so much, Ibrahim. Well, as we have already maybe yesterday, we have some time for putting questions. Ibrahim is the key speaker, and then we continue with the other presentations. I think it was really interesting how Ibrahim's shown his art and cultural project, educational project. And so I challenge the audience to put some questions, and I invite then Ibrahim to come here and to answer these questions. So in the morning, it's always in some way difficult. Well, I like really the idea of excavation as you an excavator, and one of the things that I think is really interesting, and if you could talk a little bit more about the future of the school, the way that you want to connect the same ideas of experience, excavation, build, involve the students in the build process, and how are you thinking of doing this? Could you share this in some way?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I guess it's quite a simple one, because the way we think about the parliamentary body is the same way I was thinking about the idea of the art school, that we could design the school in such a way that the building process becomes part of the school itself. So when we start through the design and also through the building, because if we are going to have students, how are the students going to be part of the building of, let's say, the institution in itself, in a way? So that's how come we started with the greenhouse and then the parliament. Currently, we're working on the textile space, which is this old cotton factory, which was built in the 70s but abandoned. And the idea of treating it as almost like a clay sculpture, and then taking a mold of the entire building and then rebuilding it with the earth, because the space we plan to build it in, it's a gravel pit, and normally that's what you fetch in order to build the foundations of building. But you can also mix it, and then through a rammed earth technique, you can also create like superstructures out of it. So I'm really interested in ways in which the students, they don't just have to be artists. We are also interested in engineers and mathematicians, because it's a question, not really a solution. It's not as if when we build the space, then it's done. So that's how come all these years I kept on developing one project or one space after the other, because I myself haven't really found, it's not like I'm looking for answers, but I'm asking an open-ended question, and I think that I'm trying to invite as many people as possible into it. So as architects and other people, if you want to participate or contribute your labor or to do things, please find us. Yes.
Hi, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for that presentation. It was very, very interesting. My name is Edith Anne Pajot. I'm from Canada. I'm an art historian at UQAM, Université du Québec à Montréal. So I'm very pleased to see all of that. That's wonderful. I have two questions. One is very trivial, and the second one is more conceptual. The first trivial question is, at the beginning of the project, how did you finance it? How did you establish all the partnerships? And the second question is about archives. So I would like you, if it's possible, to develop a little bit more how you conceive archives, or should I say counter-archives, because it's implicit in all of your projects.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, thank you. The question of financing always comes up, you know. It has always been one of the trickiest things. But I liked this idea. So one of the excavation points that I started, that's what I started with, because my background, I came heavily from painting, but from a more conceptual background of painting, and also looking at it purely in relation to economic systems and models. So as I was talking, the last image of taking this material and using the value of it to transform it into art, And then when it goes through the art market, the capital was what I started building the institution with. I was interested in the idea of the debt that I spoke about, that the debt could become that teleportation. So till date, all the, like everything that you see is actually from the work itself. It could be from photographs that I've taken from the building process, and some of them become art, and then that money comes back into building the space. So it's not like no one finances the space in any way or in anything. Of course, from time to time, my colleagues who manage the institution, I also give them the freedom to do the things that they want. So sometimes they might also apply for a grant to buy some equipment, to do a workshop or things like that. But with regards to the physical infrastructure, it was very deliberate. It was a political decision. After all, it's important that a generation of young people who are growing up understand that it's possible to actually build new forms of institutions and new forms of thinking out of the debt and the crisis that we inherited. So it's not as if in our political system, as in Ghana, each time we're at the IMF, oh, we need money, we're in a financial crisis. And I'm like, come on, you know? So that is the thing, that at the end of the day, it's not as if it also has to be big. There could be other people that take initiatives. They could be farmers, engineers, doctors. After all, there are even doctors who try to build their own hospitals in small villages and things like that. So it's that spirit that in the future we say that, oh yeah, it was very difficult, but through the difficulty, they were able to get things out of the same condition. Yeah, so that's the first thing. The second thing about the archive is that for me, everything, even the building process, so I document heavily, but I also like to travel and collect things. So currently one of the things that I'm doing is I'm trying to buy these old trains that I was showing from the States. It's very difficult to do, but it's necessary. So you have to sometimes use means that you don't, it's not really, yeah, you know, it's not ethical, but yeah, a lot of the people who are in charge of the world, they are not ethical anyway. So who are we to deceive ourselves that we always have to do the right thing in order to be able to do the right thing? So all those processes for me are part of the archival systems. And yeah, as we're doing now, the idea is to be able to disseminate. So even with what we have in Tamale, if the other people are interested in those materials like digital copies or having storage in other places, as I was looking at Ann Wilson's work yesterday, it's very important that we share these things. So for me, it's not just to build and keep, but it's also to create a new premise at which, even if you're from Greece or from London or from Shanghai or from New York, we can all share in the basis of this thing, and then we can disseminate it, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim. It was really a pleasure to see your project going through. And the question that I have for you is, I think you need to come to build a small airport for your students because all them in the future they dream to fly, and and that idea of utopia that you are building with your project and with your team is it's a huge vision, and I'm afraid that they finished as a captains from Lufthansa of KPLM. The question that it's not a question. To build all this structure and all the difficulties that you have and your team, how you see, do you have exercises with the students to see how the future of this place is going through? Do you design with them also how they see the future of this place? Or how do they feel it in a certain way regarding this process? Can you give me a little bit regarding this feedback? Thank you so much.
Yeah, I guess it's all together, yeah, both of them. involving them in like thinking about ideas and forms in workshops that we do consistently by different artists, architects, and engineers. Because in the last couple of years, we've been very fortunate to have like-minded people who are very interested in this. So currently, we have a group of young people in Tamale who proposed this idea of doing this kind of coding robotics things. So we bought all these computers from the microchip too. So we're able to build like computers with the kits within these spaces. And in that process of building, I think it's the dialogue and conversation, because because they're in the community, they witness the birth of the institution, because every day they are coming there to play. They are seeing how things are transforming. So it's not like the archive, again, coming back to it, is also the thing that becomes like a register in their minds in a way. Because sometimes you're living in the future and you see an idea or project like, oh, I wish I had seen how this thing became. So I'm always saying things like, I envy people who work in construction sites, because they see quite a lot that we miss, you know. And we only come to occupy the space. But I think that when you witness the birth, if you were to witness the birth of the universe, how would that transform the way that you think? So it might not be very direct, but I'm more interested in the poetics of it and what it does to them on an ideological level, just to think. That's why I was referring a lot to this simple idea of courage. And when I honestly took the planes from Accra to Tamale, I didn't do it because I wanted to, but it's also about the sheer audacity of courage. Like Ghana, like, no, why would you do things? It doesn't matter, it's not important. But yes, it was done. So it means that now anything is possible, you know? So, yeah, this is a bad joke, but in Ghana, each time people see things like that, like, oh, it's only the white man who can do something like this, you know? Because people don't believe that, oh, but the black man, we are concerned more about what we eat right now. But I'm like, no, even in the 50s, when we're gaining independence, the idea was to build into the future. But with the stagnation of the future within that time, and now, which is our past, we as artists can only be the travelers that I was talking about, to go back and to exhume that and to use that as a means to build new futures. So those futures are implicated within the political gestures of what we do within our work, how we involve others, even the materiality of it, the political form, all those things will take its own form in the future.
Thank you, really. You ended on a paradox, and of course paradoxes are probably what drives you most. But I was interested when you said, well, you didn't have any interest from the government or the Ministry of Culture. Now that's also a paradox, but do you feel that's very positive for you, or would you like more interest from them? Or do you think that could prevent your more guerrilla tactics?
Yeah, it's at the end of the day, the question is about accessibility. It's a question of the public. Like, it's not a question of the state per se. Like when I buy buildings that are state-owned, which belong to the public, I only am interested in taking it from the state and making it public. So when I build things like my studio, it's a private venture capital, but I'm interested in how it becomes public. So the question is about dissemination. A lot of the people who work in the state are bureaucrats, and they don't have the mental will and capacity, and there's a general lack of imagination. So if you're describing an idea, like this is, it's too much, like what are you talking about, you know? How can we see the results, let's say in the next 2-3 years? Because whilst we're in power, we need to be able to show some results. Whereas I'm like, no, maybe this might prove something in the next 50 years. We might not be alive, but it will change the course of the future. They are not interested. So sometimes it's a gift not to have that. But it's also not good, because we need more of these things happening around. And with the power of the state, we can disseminate. So it's good that we have collaborations. For instance, if I propose to the state that, let me take an old building and let me transform it into a museum. I made many of those proposals, but it never got anywhere. They'll be like, no, we don't need that. But then again, maybe they would rather invest, let's say, $20 million into doing some festivals that might say, oh, people come to Ghana. Ghana is a cultural destination, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, it's a cultural destination in terms of fun in a moment, but it doesn't change anything, things like that. So my only belief that it's in order for that to change, maybe in the future, when we have the current kids who are growing up, if truly what we are doing is able to transform their will and their imagination, in the future there might be a different conversation. You might have people who are in politics who are not small-minded and who are not saying that, oh, but we have to be concerned about now. But they will be somehow also invested in the future, whilst also holding on to the significance of the past in which they come from. So that's how I think about it.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I want to ask you about the archaeology and about the how you identification the things have you found in the archaeology way and the idea of archaeology with the history of Ghana.
Okay.
How do you make this connection between that idea so occidental maybe and with the Ghana history?
Okay.
How do you connect the things?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. With archaeology, the University of Ghana in Accra, I'm currently working with the Department of Archaeology. And for many years, they've sent their students around the country to do all kinds of archaeological exercises and all that. And I had an interest in collaborating with them because in some of the older settlements in Ghana, dating back to the time around Christ and all that, 1,500, 2,000 years ago, there were really interesting materials that were buried. That a lot of those materials are unknown to young people or old people within the context of where we are. And I thought it might be interesting to use that as a point, like having infrastructure in the first place, but negotiating to bring those objects from the boxes in which they are being kept in into the institutional context. But one thing is to transform, like to work with younger artists to reinterpret these sculptures, to make either colossal versions of it or to make smaller versions of it, which we can then now be able to bury and within the space, and then through the burying, we can engage the young people in this idea of excavating these objects. Or we have a clay laboratory sculpture workshop there where they can make objects from different points in time. It could be within the present, but the idea that they could bury these objects and then maybe in 2-3 years they can re-excavate these objects and then they can dismantle them and then through some kind of metamorphosis, because I really don't just like the idea of this ethnographic space where you go and then, oh, this is from 1,000 years ago, they were doing this and that. I'm really interested in how they relate the confrontation to the form. Of course, the history comes with the form in a way. So the trains and all those things become implicated within that, because within this gesture, we can also bring even the contemporary into the archaeological things, because it's not just going back years, but it's also going into the future. So we can also imagine something in the future which becomes like an archaeological form. So I like this, yeah, it's just a thinking process, yeah.
Thank you so much. My proposal is at the end of the morning, we have the debates with all the conference. And I think this presentation and Mahama's project was really interesting because it's an informal space of education, of arts and culture, and the freedom of making this kind of approaches and work with different communities and make these kind of connections in institutional and more formal spaces in some way are impossible. And so today and during the morning we're going to see some cases of how can we engage community in public spaces intervention. So we're going to have Artemis going to make a conference, and then we're going to have Monica from Lithuania and Susanna Pires from Lisbon talking about also their experience. Thank you so much, Ibrahim. 5 minutes only break, and just to prepare and to continue the rest of the conference. Thank you so much.
Acho que sim, acho que não me enganei, mas pelo sim, pelo não, qual é que é? Os abrigos, está aqui. Ah, ok, passa. Ok, está certo, pronto. Só ver se tenho a minha zoomada lá.
Natasha, did you hear me? Hello? Hello? Natasha, did you hear me? Natasha, hello?
Monica.
Did you hear me?
We're checking. Yes, perfectly. We're
Yes, now it's okay.
Can you say hello to Francisco? Hello, Francisco.
Hello, Francisco. Did you hear me?
He can hear you. He says hi also. Thank you, Monica. Perfect. Wonderful. Everything is okay. Great. Thank you so much. You can mute yourself again now.
E vamos aproveitar, vamos só nos tentar ficar bem todos.
Okay. Hold on. Perfect.
Mas isso pode repetir a comunicação, por favor.
Where is it? It's here. Okay. So I double click and then you do the rest.
You just
Double click.
you just double click. You don't need to pass to anything.
You do it.
I see everything from the other side, and I'll put it on the big screen.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
I'm sure the Contextile will put us all in touch, and then we should find ways in which we can do things. Yeah, if we can come from Ghana to do things, you guys should come to Ghana. Yeah. Okay, good. I hope when he comes to Ghana, Putin will not trace him too.
Well, friends, we are going to start the second part of these textile talks. Please come inside. I think the coffee is really good, really nice, the biscuits also, but you can have it here. Ding dong. They are here in the coffee. Ding dong. It's time to come. Eu já disse, mas vou pensar. Well, I was saying the coffee is really nice, it's really good, but we have to continue in these talks because we still have some presentations. We have Monica from Lithuania that she's online waiting also, and we heard that Han Wilson is also seeing us from YouTube and Facebook, so thank you for your participation and interest. And now we are going to continue with the presentations. Just some moments more. The coffee is really good. We're going to have to stop and disconnect the machine. well, I'm going to present Artemis. Well, Artemis Papareggiu is a median artist exploring the convergence of natural and computational systems inside the urban landscape. Her work spans installations, objects, and textiles inspired by visions of collective inhabitation and collaborative creation that combine computational with traditional tools. Artemis grounds her practice on scientific epistemologies that include participatory, handcrafted, open source, and shared knowledge. Artemis holds a diploma in architecture from the Department of Architecture in University of Patras in 2006, and a master in computational studio arts from Goldsmiths in London in 2009. She is associate curator at the Biennale of Western Balkans and a member of the collective Maurice, a fluid group of women developing works around cohabitation with more than human life forms and plant life in the city. Thank you so much for in this participation, and please.
Hi everyone, good morning. Thank you, Susanna, for the kind introduction, and thank you for having me today here at Contextile. I would like to talk today about textiles in public and how the presence of textile works and public artworks can open up moments of informal learning. I would like, yes, to see how my presentation also would appear on the... Perfect. I was told not to...
You can touch.
I could?
Yes.
Okay.
You touch things. Life is better. Modulatura. Is this okay? And then you just up and down. Is this okay? Or
I prefer...
You prefer? This one and that one simultaneously. No. Like this. Can I?
Mm-hmm. Full screen. Perfect.
Oh, okay, okay.
Great. So, yes, I would like to reflect on two artworks. One actually was I was on the side of the curator because I was invited from the Biennale of Western Balkans to curate a project, and the other one from the side of the artist, and to explore these moments in public spaces that allowed for moments of informal learning. For the Biennale of Western Balkans, I was invited, which is an organization and a project in Greece, in the northwestern part of Greece. I was invited to curate the Artist and Community Synergies for a Textile Month in 2020. And then we also collaborated with BN21 in Slovenia. So I'd like to talk about the background of these projects because talking about the processes, I think, will allow us to understand how these projects came to life and how they allowed for these public moments to come to life. So very important in both projects I will talk about are all the actors that were involved. Without them, none of the projects would be possible, and I'm mentioning them just because they were all engaged and involved and believing in this vision. So a clear vision and a lot of collaborators were involved to make these projects, both projects, happen. Then research. Research has been very important in both projects, and in this case, with a team of curators, we did a lot of research in Greece and the Western Balkans to find communities of practice, traditional practices, I mean traditional communities, and also institutions working with textiles. And then we contacted communities as well as artists through open calls. Actually, we did 3 open calls, one for researchers, one for artists working with textile, and one for the communities of practice. I have to say it was quite difficult to find some communities in the Balkans, because a lot of, very often, communities in the Balkans were not able to communicate in English, and we had a lot of issues in reaching them, because some of them are also in very remote places. So this is a lesson and a takeaway that we realized while doing the project. After the research, we matched together with the very valuable help of our committees, and I want to also thank Janice for being part of one of our committees, to match communities and artists that were selected, because we had to find, our committees had to find common traits and interested themes and topics that shared between the communities and the artists. And these are some of the examples of the work that was being done in the course of 4 weeks. So the residency was online because of the COVID restrictions, and these posed some difficulties, but also some opportunities for remote collaboration. So we also realized that online collaboration between communities and these groups that are traditionally work in person and in their own way and in their own language, I mean, with specific ways of gathering and talking about issues, was not always easy to achieve online. But we really tried to facilitate the communication, at least in the first meetings, to reach out, connect them, and discuss. And then we allowed them for 4 weeks to go on and find their common threads and work together on works. For example, there was a lot of work on symbolism of local textiles. There was a lot of work on patterns and repatterning symbols that were found in aprons, and there was a lot of work with members of a community working with looms, traditional looms, and the artist working in the digital version of these small carpets, and also exposing his code, so his HTML drawings, and putting everything side by side. We had a lot of storytelling we had projects working with storytelling between intergenerational practices of mending textiles and heritage from a mother to daughter and so on in some communities, and also artists working with natural dyes, which was the expertise of another textile community in Athens. The public moments in this project that were very important for us, and part of the vision, the overall vision of this Textile Month, was to bring tradition outside in public spaces, and also to create moments of sharing knowledge, because we felt strongly that traditional communities have such rich archives and knowledge and practices, but sometimes they cannot, or it's not easy to disseminate it and to kind of allow other people inside this practice to have a new look at it, and to perhaps work with it and add to its meaning through dialogue, and kind of bringing the discourse in more contemporary contexts. So the public moments in this project, since it was online, we made sure that we keep weekly diaries that are on the website, on the blog of the website, and they were updated weekly. So 4 weeks of the process is still online and exposed. So audiences could visit the work and a short text about how the work is going. There was no demand for finite works because we know that 1 month was definitely not enough, and especially online, to establish collaboration, establish the trust, come into terms and create something together. So it was important for us to expose the process of making works together. And another public moment was the engagement of students from the Architecture School of Ioannina with a leader, a course leader, who were inspired by local textiles of Ioannina, of the region of northwestern Greece, of Epirus, and they translated them into a 3D modules that you see around that space, and we created a 3D space in Mozilla Hubs to host the exhibition, so the work in progress of the artists, and then to have to visit that space and have the artists explain their process in 1 day for the finissage. We know, of course, that the online public spaces have their limitations, but all public spaces are not always accessible by all people, as we know. We had a very beautiful collaboration afterwards with BN21, the Biennale of Textiles in Slovenia, in Kranj, and we discussed how can we bring further this work from the online spaces into the street. So this was a participation of some of the artists on their street show. And then further, how can we bring more of actual discussion apart from the display, to create also new discourse in Kranj, locally. And one of our artists, Maria Bajk, we enabled her to go there for a residency, and she worked closely with residents of Kranj and initiating discussions about the passage from the crafts to industrial and post-industrial times in Kranj, because has a huge heritage as well. And she collected stories and textiles and written text, and she made an installation after 3 weeks of work there. So in these moments, what I'm interested in to highlight is the moments of knowledge exchange, of sharing, that is very informal and perhaps doesn't have an outcome, a prerequisite, a strict prerequisite of learning, but I feel that during the exchange of the artists with communities and the exchange with the artists and the audiences in the online platforms and here in the physical spaces of Kranj, there were moments of sharing knowledge, and this was important. And then I'd like to talk about Weaving Walls, a project that I did as an artist together with my collaborator Gabriella Mastrangelo for Entropica Lab. This is my lab that is in Athens, let's say, but we have done work across many European countries. And this work also it came a long way in order to be realized. Again, this project was a result of many institutions, many people collaborating and believing in this vision and joining forces. So this again is the beginning of the project and a constellation of people and institutions. And it started with research again, a different kind of research, in situ research, where we were invited in 2015 to start the research in Łódź, and by Convivo Foundation that I didn't mention, you saw before, because they organized the Folk Inspirations Festival in Łódź. And it's about promoting folk culture very specifically in the public space of the city. But the brief was, they needed an installation that could work as a standalone installation promoting folk tradition, and at the same time, a backdrop for their activities and basically for folk dancing. And we were able to, we went to the library, to the university library, we researched a lot of traditional embroideries. We visited the University of Łódź, we saw how the jacquard looms work, we visited the Biala Fabrica archives, very important archives, and we observed ourselves the transformation of the economy of Łódź from crafts and small communities working with textile, with crafted textile, embroidery, and so on, to the industrial era, and turning these craftspeople also to people working in the factories, and how this change brought also this new social class in place, and also this development that we could also observe in the city. There was a lot of new construction, factories, of course, but also new neighborhoods and new social housing in the city of Łódź. And then we went also to contemporary art institutions and looked at very important artists and how they have been working with facades, but also the current state of a lot of buildings with a lot of graffiti, because they heavily invested in the early zeros in graffiti works in the city, but also a lot of buildings and neighborhoods in state of abandonment and continuous restructuring and under construction signs and fabrics covering the facades. And we came up with this idea of using a textile to create a new dialogue between a building and the city, and to work in an intention to also to mend things, to understand that these eras and the wounds perhaps and the changes in the social and political changes that they created with a very material outcome on the facade of buildings, maybe there would be a gesture of repairing that and looking into that and reconciling this passage of the textile industry and its marks on the city. So we started working from vision and sketches to the actual material intervention that we could do, and also economically speaking, because there were a lot of restrictions. And then we decided to populate a building that was privately owned, but with no hope of renovation. So the private owner gave us permission to intervene directly, and that means actually piercing really large, really long holes on the building facade, on the walls, which I think would be impossible in another city, in another context, or if we had to deal only with public property or so on. I think it would be impossible to intervene on a neoclassical building directly. And so we decided to put smaller looms, smaller, that is the size of a two-frame door, with traditional embroidery that we found in the first sketches that you saw, to scale them up, and then to use red rope as an act of connection and of connecting them into a unique textile skin, and also with this act of bringing them together, of mending, as I mentioned before. We had to build a one-on-one scale. As you can see, we used the floor of the workshop, so that the next year we went back in 2016 after all this work and preparation was done, and we were given a very big space in a cultural center, and we built the parts of the facade one-on-one on the floor, and we placed all the looms, the frames, and we started building and understanding the scale and the structure, and most challenging how the red ropes would move across the installation, because it was not a given. A lot of people helped us, and we are grateful for that. 10 people per day would come help us and go in the evening. This is the amount of help that we received. And then we started populating the workshop, and it was very interesting, and I want to raise these material issues because they are very important in this work. for us, the questions of scale, for example, was very important because we couldn't conceive, as you can see how big these frames are, we couldn't conceive how this would look from afar, how it would look from the street level. We would only, we could only guess, and we could only move forward with a lot of investment in color, creating a weft from a white background. Also, the building itself had a very strange color, and the time, you can see the wearing of the time, how it starts, the color starts coming off. And so we wanted the white background as a warp and the weft very, very colorful. We also had to break down the installation in strips and also in modules of 2 or 3, because connecting them with red ropes, we could only connect up to 3, because then someone on a crane would have to go up, and they need to be able to understand what goes where, with which order, in order not to mix the ropes, the red ropes. So it was not about installing individual modules, but installing these groups of modules and understanding the ropes as well, how they work. And it was very interesting also to work with this large scale, but then we ended up working in the very, very, very small scale and working with knots and inventing knots. They were between simple knots and sailing knots and some macrame knots. But also we had to work around issues of gravity and how, because ropes, as you can understand, if they're not super tight together, they might create curves that we didn't want to. And aluminum frames have a capacity to work up to a point. No? Otherwise, they started bending the more we pulled them together. So we had a lot of we went through a lot of negotiation with its material aspect. And in the end, we went also up on the crane to tie the last knots between the different modules. Also the sun, and this is something, the sun would work in a way that was very interesting, and we observed it created another layer of shadow on the building itself, so that was interesting. And then we come to the public moments that I think that were also very clear intention from the beginning. We wanted the installation to be a participatory installation, even if we could not have a proper workshop engaging people throughout the process. We really wanted audiences to take part. And therefore, when we conceived the installation, we started building it up to a point, down to a point, and then we added these canvases with the green perforated material and left them blank. And 2 days before, or 2 or 3 days before the festival began, we thought, okay, now it's time to engage everyone. How is that going to happen? We don't speak Polish. And there was a stage already in place. As you can see, they are above the street level. So if someone would come, a passerby, they would have to climb up on a stage and probably feel that they are watched or that they perform something. So it was, people could be shy. That's what we were thinking. And yet, we had a very big turnout. We had a producer with us who spoke Polish, and we were just handing out this A4 with the embroidery sketches that I showed you in the beginning, the black and white. And we told them basically, you can go on and play. That's it, that there is no rules. We've done what we've done, go in, play, have fun. This is the traditional embroideries, but you can actually do whatever you want. And it was impressive. We were very happy. People came and played, and they were concentrated during this time. And then the next, after a day or two, this one, okay, sorry, I've been very silent then. Okay, so during the festival, another event happened, which was the actual folk dances took place, and there was different lighting and different setup there, and then it turned to be the backdrop for the public stage that they wanted, and the street was populated by the festival audiences. What I want to to highlight in this process is that, okay, how did this let's say, public moment or informal learning took place? Because a lot of people went away with something. For example, one of those, two or three of those actually, but the one that I see over there with the legs was actually a translation of a traditional embroidery. So in my opinion and in our opinion, there was this knowledge coming out from the archives of the books and the library, the university library, coming out to the street, a little bit transformed, scaled up, and there was this moment of engaging with it, translating it, and playing with it. So for me, this was a very important moment of informal learning. But how did this happen? This was not a white canvas in the end. All the process that we did beforehand resulted in this momentum where actually there was an opening of our efforts and our visions. There was an opening and a response from the audiences in that moment. Of course, the festival had a lot of advertising going on. Of course, they saw us build it. But there was a lot of word of mouth as well, I think. And there was, how can I say, in some way that I'm not also entirely sure, our efforts somehow took form and materialized. So if we want to generally think about what enables these moments of informal learning in public space, I would say that they are very collaborative projects. A lot of institutions and people have to collaborate and to be part of the vision. But also, we also need to be able to how can I say, engage and feel and be present in what we do and be able to open up also emotionally and affect, like through affect to the whole process. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, and sorry, Artemis. And at the last moment, we had Monica is also waiting online. And thank you so much for your presentation. And now we are going to have the presentation in Zoom by Monica Graziani. She's a visual and a textile artist and head and associate professor of textile department in Kaunas faculty, Vilnius Academy of Arts. And since 2013, she's a member of the organizational committee of the Kaunas Biennale. She has curated and managed a number of local, national, and international exhibitions and projects, including a major Kaunas Biennale post-industrial project, Textile Roots, and many others. Our focus is on building international relations between artists, organizations, and cultural operators through the interdisciplinary art projects, artist promotion, and networking. Well, I think she has a huge curriculum. She's a great friend of us, and thank you so much, Monica, for the presentation. She's also from the scientific committee of this talk, and I pass to you your presentation. Thank you.
Hello, it is a great opportunity for me to be part of this very important talk, I think. I will be talking more in the context of the teaching and education practices, because the young generation, I think, is most important for us, for all of us. So I will be sharing now my maybe screen and start. Is it okay?
Yes. It's okay. You can continue.
It's okay. So, as already Susanna told, that I am teaching in the Arts Academy, but in Art Academy of Lithuania, which is called Vilnius Arts Academy, we have 4 faculties in Kaunas as well. And in Kaunas, we are running a program which is called Textile Art and Media Program. And what I would like to start with my presentation about, just a few days ago, we opened an exhibition which is called Rhythm, Rhythm, Rhythm. And it was dedicated, this exhibition, for our 100 years anniversary of our department. And it was established by one professor. Actually, he was a scenographer, but he was established the carpet studio in this 1922. And starting, he was an Orientalist, and he was a great person and great professor. But the main thing, what he was thinking, that the rhythm was everything, and rhythm works at the level of composition. It is not only musical but also visual. So he always was trying to concentrate on the rhythm, and maybe it is seems could be very fashionable, but actually in nowadays we always somehow turning around and circling a lot of things in our teaching, in our lives. So this rhythm starting to be very contemporary, contemporary and conceptually relates with our processes in our teaching methods, and also in the looking through all these our students' works. So of course, in our academy, in our program, we have textile design as well, 2 courses. 2 years we are learning students textile design, but also textile art. That's why this what we are doing here in Kaunas, it's kind of this dual professional code, which is really important, and really connects traditional understanding of the textiles, as in this piece of Živilė Labutite, of our master. She was actually really interested in optical and kinetic expressions, and make a project which was connected traditional Lithuanian ornamentic with the kinetic things. And also, what it is the other thing that we are doing in our department, it was established Kaunas Biennial in 1998. And it was running as a Kaunas Textile Biennial till 2013. Now it is running Kaunas Contemporary Art Biennial, Kaunas Contemporary Art Biennial still. But what it is interesting, that it is still as in the processes, it is still have this how we having this smell or some feeling about textiles all the time, because Kaunas was really important textile industry city between 2 world wars, and it was really important place through the Soviet period, which was huge industry in the textiles. So that's why Kaunas was as a platform, as a site specific, as a history, storytelling, as a communities related with the textiles. It's really huge, and still it is live. That's why in our education we always include these topics about research city, site specifics things, and also through the making research, and also through the making conceptual thinking, and also critical thinking. So this project, for example, in was made in bachelor degree, but it is really important, I think, which is connected to human standing up from the bench and station, because in Lithuania we have the same word in linguistic language to stand up and the station. So in Lithuanian stotis and stotis, it is the same word. So this student, it's really took nice fragment of this. She was kind of living in the station like 1 month and take this documentation photos and weave it into traditional tapestry, and also used the digital print on that. But I think we conceptually it's really nicely connects the people who is waiting train and in Kaunas, and also this thread which is connected with time waiting and person. What it is actually what it is about the new trends and kind of the new thing what I get it through my teaching points. It is this in this last years you can feel this critical ecological thinking, this slow processes thinking about textiles. That brings us as joy is that the young generation finds the future of the planet important, and the most of them demonstrate responsible relationships with the environment. Together with the nature presentation topics and sustainable organic thinking, other thing that comes the attention is respectable and well-considered relationship with materiality. So the founding a new materiality and new ways of the how the traditional textile understanding and the new materiality laboratory of the new materiality founding could relate. So this piece is from the Indrės Pitriter master research about the new materiality, actually how it connects, because Indrės Pitriter, for example, she was our last master student, but she was participating in Gimaraish in the residency of the Magic Carpets as an artist, as a young artist, and she was part of the Magic Carpets platform, which Contextile is our partners also, and making really nice residences for the young artists. So I think it's really important thing to think through the not only making of course and understanding the textile skills, it's important, but I think the most important thing it is mind, and mind how you can go with this mind with the how to say, like a religion, and in the textiles, how you with this mind are dealing in your life and in your creativity. The last my slides actually, because it was very strict, and you know that it was really hard to have these 10 slides in all these 100-year processes. so you know, this tapestry I took really not it was really important point of this tapestry, because this tapestry showing for us that it is possible in these ages, in our ages, for the young generation persons to look through the to weaving and conceptualize it, because this student and artist already now, she is actually weaving this tapestry 3 years. So she studied 2 years and then took a 1-year break, 2 years, and then came back. And she started again. 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 And she And then, because it was not enough time for her to weave this tapestry, but each day routine and what she actually choose, what the conceptual photographic image she choose. It is a simple day morning of her two girls and saying hello, good morning for the mother. And when she has this presentation of this masterpiece, these girls already was grown up 3 years, you know. So you can look how the generations. It's really going through the different understanding about and conceptualizing the textiles. So the fate of textile is coded in a dual state and determinate functional and artistical conceptual directions, which this I could describe as my personal thing, and I thought that we could call it professional dualism, a possibility to apply, reflect the rational functional needs, or contrary, ignore the functionality while using the soft textile powers in the arena of contemporary art. If we think about this dilemma on function and anti-function, it could be really specificated, and this field have opens very wide opportunities for the creative expression and great freedom for the personal choices, conceptual and critical thinking. So, of course, these relationships with the expressions and how we are thinking as a humans, it's really, I think, important, and where we are putting these knowledges and how we are mediating these knowledges, it's really important. That's why it was a really big discussion in our departments. Always it's going, and that's why we are calling textile art and media program, because we are trying to mediate this our field, huge field of textiles, which is really seems to be wild and really sometimes difficult. So mediation of the textiles, I think, as a media, as a technology, and collaborating with two traditional and digital things, for example, like media as a technology, but also media, it have as another term, as a making the notes, making the mind about that, and how the communities, how the citizens, how the viewers could understand that. So thank you so much. If we have some time, I just want to finish with one project, which was also our master research about the relationships between reality and virtuality in contemporary textile arts. And her choice was to take a folk Lithuanian song. The singer, which she was singing while she was weaving, and she put it in her digital piece.
Is it a video?
Yes.
We are not seeing it. Monica? Monica, are you there?
You cannot hear?
No, we are not seeing the video. Can you put it in play? Playing?
No.
It's going, okay.
Is it?
There is sound in the video?
Yes, it is sound, but you didn't hear a sound?
No. When you share the video, you must share also the sound.
Sorry. Mm. And now,
Yes, yes.
did you hear a sound?
We hear from some seconds, but not anymore. Mm. Whoa. Monica, are you there? Yes, I think we lost Monica. Well, Monica, we'll ask you to share the link of the video. I think we completely lost Monica. Yes, I think we completely lost. Yes, so yes, ask to send the link and we see it later. Well, we shall continue it. And we want also to invite Monica to, at the end, to participate in the debate. Now, at last, we are going to have Susana Pires. She's born in Évora, in the south of country, in the 80s. She lives and works in Lisbon. She has a PhD in fine arts, painting, and she's an invited assistant professor of tapestry and fine arts school in Lisbon University. Work that presents itself through drawing, sculpture, installation. She assumes the textile as discursive materiality. She was part of different kinds of projects as curator, also as an artist. She has pieces in the Museum of Tapestry in Porto Alegre. She integrates the organization of meeting of Ponto Textile Art in Perspective in Arraiolos. And we invite Susana, and thank you for accepting our invitation. Let me just put this. Okay. Oops. Vou lá atrás.
Okay. So good morning. And first of all, thank you for the invitation to be here, to Natasha and Contextile. Susanna speak about me, but I will speak not as Susanna, but in the name of the Fine Arts School in the University of Lisbon. So all my presentation will be about the works of the students and in a perspective from education. As you see, we have both names even in the program because it's the first thing I have to say you. This presentation should be with Professor Hugo Ferrão. He was the full professor of tapestry class during the last 30 years. So I start to be his assistant. Now he retired and I assumed the class. But it was very important for me that he was here. Unfortunately, he can't come, but all the work comes from him too, and the things that I learned from him. So, I come from Lisbon. This is the Fine Arts School of Lisbon. It's an old convent, Convento de São Francisco. And it's an old building in the heart of the Lisbon city. In the 19th century and in the 20th century, Chiado was the place where artists, poets, musicians meet each other and discuss the things. Today, we are in the epicenter of tourism, so you can imagine it's not exactly the same thing. However, we have the same building, the same convent. It's an old building. Sometimes the classrooms are a little bit small. However, in spite of they are small, there are a kind of magic somewhere on that walls. Or I try to believe that we can continue to do that kind of magic when the students go to construct something. So this is the part of the school. Just for saying, this is a school with 186 years. So we don't have a textile course. We have a class from a tapestry class that comes in the past as an optional class from painters studies. Okay, so this is important to. This is a different background. So as university, the Fine Arts School became a university in 1950, but it is a refreshing from the old Academy of Fine Arts. So it's a school with almost 200 years. The tapestry class begins in 1977 as a part of like a technology of painting. It was a little class with tapestry and ceramics. So they are like an option that painters can have as a technology of painting. This class at the beginning was very close to the work with the manufacturers, and the class was structured to do cartons. The painters do cartons to tapestry. Okay, you have to understand that it was the heritage from modernism and from the dictatorships that we live on that time. So the big tapestries sometimes are a way to expanding the icons of the regimes. So the class start here. Fortunately, after the end of the dictatorship in Portugal from Salazar in 75, was a refresh of the class. On that class, that refreshing thing was very important because they drink the influence of Bauhaus, of New Tapestry, and especially from Lausanne Biennale. So the course changed the way of doing based on that influences. But still was like a little class, an optional class only for painters. The last change of the class was with Bologna process. And now, currently, tapestry still exists at the name of tapestry, and still that we work in textiles too in general, but still is an optional class from Fine Arts School. For now, the big difference, it's not only for painters, but all the courses can go to that class. Design, sculpture, wherever. Every student from Fine Arts School, we are different courses, can come to the tapestry school. So this is almost to understand the background because we have an old heritage, but however we try to be working for the future with what is happening in contemporary art. So as you see, this is part of our convent. This is part of our small tapestry class. And one thing is important that some years ago, we have like 5-10 students. Now we have 50. So it's a little bit different. Okay, so we have the looms. We only have manual looms, but we work in everything we try. Okay, so the class is in 3 levels. The students can have the class in level 1 is the initiation. It's 1 semester. After that, if they want to continue, they go to the 2nd level, and if they want to choose, they can do the 3 levels. So it's like 3 semesters. The students can do only 1 or 2 or 3. The first level is we start from the beginning with the first exercise of waving. Okay, so in the first level is like the initiation. We start in the beginning of the year with some exercises and try to go with them to the projects, their own projects. The last level, it's each student have his own project with textile in all the time, the ways that they want. So this is one of the first exercises that you know with waving, with different materials, and we say, let's try everything. Let's understand how to use tactility, how to use materials, to you understand the structure and how works waving. So it's like 1 or 2 weeks with this, the students start to move their hands and to understand the materiality. After that, we still have a typical exercise from the carton to the tapestry. It's like a small exercise, but that we understand that it's important to start from that. This is an example. They choose some painting, some draw, and they do, as a second exercise, something very technical to understand with a taffeta point, whatever. After that, this is another example of a pass to a draw for tapestry. They do a carton, and after that, they start working projects. I choose to bring recent works. The most part of them are here in the exhibition of the students that you will see in the afternoon. They are students with like 19 and 20 years. It was a project from the last year from a student from the level 3. She works with tapestry, with ceramic works incorporated. So, but our meaning, what we want, that students find their own expression with tutor conversations. And my aim as a teacher is, in the end of the semester, they have almost different works as possible. So this is a student from painting who did a tapestry work. This is a detail with the ceramics incorporated. And this is a student from design who did candles using textile too. This is another work of a student. She did like a contemporary pop art, but it's a very contemporary issue with punch needle. The work is also here. But the question is to understand that we can understand tapestry as a classical way, but also as a contemporary way, or in a completely different work, much more with the materiality, but also with the very conceptual and poetical things of the material. For example, that student, Clarice, she is like a classic soul in a same that she really tried to find the poetics of the materiality when she worked with it. This is another one from the same student. It's not here in the exhibition. She also did one big construction. It's another work that was here, not in this Biennale, but one before, from a student, Joanna, that is a big sculpture with textiles, but something near to the sculpture, to the design. Or these little tickets that's like embroideries that she do like a letter, like a love letter with embroideries. Or we can also have students who work with a traditional embroidery. For example, that one, she used their own draws to do embroidery. Or another kind of completely different embroidery is like a part of, is a kind of graffiti, but in a table, in a tissue for it. Is that? Thank you, sorry. This is another example of a student that was here too. It's a performer, so she created with the textile a support to a performance. She created a video. And also Monica speak. Fortunately, the students are also concerned about the future and the materialities. So we also try to leave that approach to the students who want to work with that. It was a work with the kombucha textile. The student created the tissue with the kombucha, and after that, she used the textile with kombucha not to do clothes or whatever, but to paint. So she created the tissue to have a support to paint with the translation of the things. So this is some kind of examples that to understand that we start from the beginning, in the first level, and after that we try in somehow to go to each student have their own projects using textile in different ways. Only to finish, one big thing that Professor Hugo started was to work with another institutions, do exhibitions outside the university. With you, with Contextile, with Paula, it's upstairs from the Museu from Tapeçaria de Porto Alegre. So Professor Hugo started this art lab, making like a group of exhibitions and special places with a very concerned relation with textiles. And since the last years, he started to create this kind of exhibitions with the aim of have the students outside of the university. So this is the Contextile from 2020, and this is a part of the exhibition that you will see in the afternoon. And that's it.
We are almost finishing. Let me see. Okay. Well, to finish, well, I must say that we had in the program an architect, Celine Verissimo, that she's going to make a presentation, but she had some personal problems and she was not able to come. Anyway, it was, for me, I think it's also important to bring some relations and connections with the other areas, because one of the goals of this talk was to understand the potential links between textiles and other artistic ways of designing and creating. So I bring my perspective from my experience as the educator teacher in the project area, in architecture, in cultural projects, as a curator and cultural manager. So my way of to see and understand these links is to try to, in some way, see how this influence and how the interception of this discipline of architecture with themes linked to the contemporary textile art influence and is with the backdrop of design and also with the sustainable issues. And for me, it was really important to the experience that I share as curator of Anne Hamilton in 2018. And so what it's really important for in this area is to share the experience of the process. I brought this image for Natasha, but she's not here because of the fits that she talked yesterday. And this shown this image of the project of Anne Hamilton that she's worked with the idea of the cloth as a skin, a second skin that comes from the birth until death. And she works with some issues that in different ways, but the process and the way that she engaged with the community and the place is really interesting, and it was a great opportunity to work with her and to see the different connections that were established. And so to think about these potential links between textiles and to see the intersection and the influence in the architect, I found that we have a common ground. Then the common ground that now borders and frontiers from disciplines are more and more blurred, unfortunately. And this is the Common Ground project. So I work with my students in projects. So normally in architecture, the main issues of project is related with place, program, and space. And so place, the textile problems bring me to one issue. That is the new territories that are being transformed because of the textile waste. And we Celine was going to talk about that when we share some reflections together. And we see that there's a global movement, and this is a phenomenon that is happening at the moment, that in the north, in the Occident, for example, even here in Portugal, they are exporting textile waste and fast fashion pieces to the south, to the South America, to Africa, and this global phenomenon problem bring us to different kinds of problems, and also to the awareness that we must have that not plastic is the only problem, and we have to find solutions to deal with this really issue and big problem. So I'm going to do it in a really fast way and just show you one project. Clarisse Marlet, it's a French architect that made a brand, Fabrique. And after the textile waste, she's producing bricks. And the bricks are in the same way and the same process as the earth architecture. So we can work with textile waste and transform it in new products, and we can also work in the same way that we work with adobe, earth architecture, and bricks. And so that could be one way to deal with this problem. In the talk that we had in September, it was also really interesting because we had a presentation from Lotto Zero, that is a cultural, independent cultural center in the region of Prato, Italy, the region of Tuscan. And they brought the example of working with artists, architects, designers, and they have residencies projects and laboratories, and they work on this area of recycling. And one of the things that I was amazed that I didn't knew is that this region is specialized in the recycling textiles since the 19th century. So it's something that is normal to do, and they have already that technique, and they work in the research area, experimenting new approaches to also these old techniques that they have in that region. So if the first issue of place connects with the transforming territory, is connected also with history, memory, community, and but we cannot only look at our conditions. We have to look in a global way, and to see how can we also present solutions and to be a contribution to this global problem. So individual approaches and other can also show us a good examples how can we work in the future. So the second issue is related with program, and today we had already these presentations of informal and formal spaces of education, spaces of arts, public spaces, community, how to engage it. And related with, I don't know if you see it, it's really clear, related with the theme of space. I bring only two examples, maybe this image, it's easier. Well, these examples are from Francis Cary, the architect that received the Pritzker Prize. I knew before because he had also some connections in Portugal and in Porto. But I bring only two examples of his work. This exhibition in Chicago, where he worked with textile, because Chicago has a huge tradition in this textile industry, and he made this intervention and the exhibition in some way. This abstract and geometrical composition reflects the Chicago place, the urbanization and the idea of the town. And in this exhibition, he shows also the dispositives that he used in this in these projects, how he works the idea of formal plasticity, the matter, the permanence, the affinity, how can he also works the experience, the body perceptions, also to work with different materials and to engage this idea of the place with limits and no limits. And so this is my contribution to this idea of textile and architecture as a possibility to make this connection, the intertextualities that was also in the reference of the artistic director of Claudia, this concept of remake. And so this is for me also an opportunity to reflect in my own experience as a teacher and to also to bring to the students and to reflect about this influence and the links that we share here in the talks and also in the Biennale. So thank you. It's going to be really brief. The idea was just to finish, and now we are going to open the debate, and then at the end, Janice is going to make the resume. And we are just to inform you at 2:30, the guided tours will start here to the international exhibition in the space of Villa Flor Palace. And 1 hour after is going to be in the gallery of University of Minho, when we are going to see the schools, installations and exhibitions. And 1 hour after is going to be in Convent of Capuchos, the residences artists projects. Claudia is going to make the guided tour, and then also to Siage to see the 10 artists exhibition. The first one, sorry, I forgot, is going to be a guided tour with Janice and Lala and Orenzio. And the second one I expect to be with Natasha, that's not here, and Susanna. And so we like very much for you to be in that guided tour. Have you any question to finish? Can I invite you to come here, the participants? Or do you want to stay there and I put the microphone? Oh, great, Monica.
So sorry for that. Because
But it's good, but you can be a part of the debate. Yeah. Well, I'm going to start to open the debate. You said in your presentation it's a master's degree and you have the textile discipline in 2 years?
No, we have bachelor degree 4 years and master degree 2 years and also PhD, but it is in Vilnius. So in Kaunas we have not a department of PhD, but some of our students are going to PhD studies as well sometimes. But we have 2 years dedicated for the text more. It's in program 2 years we more dedicated for the textile design. So it is really because we have a context of this, as I said, this Kaunas textile industry city. It is not left so many of the factories, but there are some companies which is really doing well, smaller companies. And we are collaborating with them and making textile design. And also now we're starting a little bit related to the fashion, some our topics or some our terms, but actually after we really dedicated this other 2 years for the more of the conceptual thinking, as I said, and of course we have tapestry course, which is really in 4 years of the studies really based on the conceptual thinking, not on the technology, but students is learning technology as well.
So your students develop projects directly with the industry? They are able to do it?
Yes, some we have some projects with the industry, but I can say that it's really hard because it's you can work mostly as a practic segment, mostly as a practic, because to include it into the study processes, it is really complicated. It is not because usually this connection industries, some industry wishes or time, even time, sometimes can be problem.
Okay. And Susanna, in your case, it's really different. In the Portuguese case also.
Class. Here, it's an optional class from the first degree, not from master. So you have, like I said before, you have 3 levels that you can choose in each semester, but it was like one semester is like 4 months or 2, because with the stops in the holidays, we don't know exactly. It's an optional class that we have 6 hours for a week. So it's just that. So it was good that we have time to do a long tapestry, but it's good. And the 3 levels, and the students, if they want, they can do the 3 levels.
Okay. And Ibrahim, in your project of the new school, do you have some ideas about in textile, art? How are you thinking about it? Because now in your project, you have you work the idea of excavation, the collections, but you have some ideas for the future related with textile?
Thank you. Yeah, I think so. One of I was talking about the old cotton factory in Tamale, which is one of the buildings that we're trying to rebuild and replicate. And the reason why Contextile was important to me was because I thought I could use that as a means to go into the textile training or teaching very seriously. Because in the city where I come from, there's a really long tradition of weaving. And and people hold on to the fabrics that they have. They don't throw them away. They pass them from one generation to the other. And there are very specific techniques that they use in weaving. But it's mostly very reduced down just to the body in a way. And I thought it could be interesting to think of the textile as a sculptural element to begin with. So we're going to rebuild this textile space as a pedagogical form. And then with the looms from Contextile, which goes back to Ghana, it can be like when we have weavers from here who come there, we can rework with them, people who weave in the community, so they can rethink about the weaving traditions and cultures, because mostly it's just reduced down to the relationship between the fabric and the body, and I want to expand it into other dimensions, and through that I think that the student bodies that we cultivate over the years can also begin to expand the idea of textiles just beyond making clothes for the body, but also in terms of buildings and many other things.
And Artemis, sorry once again for cutting your presentation. And it was really interesting, but because we wanted to have the debate, it was the only reason that we have done it. But in your projects, like also in Ibrahim's project, there is a collective process of doing, not just the project of thinking, but also of doing. And so you are a team project that you involve other people, or you involve directly in the community of making that small pieces and then make the big piece.
Depends, I think it depends on the brief that we have. Sometimes it is to really create a workshop and work with many people and conceive the project as a workshop where everyone participates from the beginning until the end. And sometimes when the brief is more about a final piece, an installation, we try to include as much as we can in the process by opening up the work process with small moments of participation along the way. Yes. And now with this new group that I'm in, the Mouries group, the collective, these processes are from the conception more collective, because we are invited by several institutions. But since the beginning, it's a very collective process because we are many, we are 7 at the moment, and we always think in collective ways and engaging more people in the making of the works.
Okay, thank you. And I invite the public to put questions. The microphone is here. Anyone?
Everybody wants to go to lunch.
Janice?
Yes, I always break the ice.
Yesterday I also break the ice. So.
Yes, I know. Well, we're used to breaking ice, aren't we? Yes. Thank you very much. I mean, you reminded me a little bit of the challenges. I mean, I went to an art school and I studied painting. But the interesting question here is why, when you move into a different kind of construction, you would still need a cartoon. And I think the issue here, and it's a question, is working in one way doesn't necessarily, you kind of begin to think about solving some of the challenges in the form you are working in. And then, if you move from the cartoon, let's say, to the tapestry form, you are maybe not solving some of the challenges that is in the construction. Do you follow me?
Not exactly.
No, okay, so I never worked from a cartoon.
Okay.
Because that was the old master's way.
It was yes.
It was the old master's way.
Yes.
And it was very prevalent in the UK. And I just think sometimes this is the question. Solving one set of ideas in one form is not necessarily translatable to the second. That's why I went to study in Poland.
Okay. Yes.
It's a completely different concept of how you construct.
On depends what in the way that you're doing this. Today they don't do exactly the cartoon painting by hand. The question is, choose one picture that is important for them and translate to another medium. Just what I say usually at the first level is one to explore, one technical exercise, because can be something very little. They can do it in like 1 week or 2 if they want. And after that, you have a little background to start to think in the materiality to your own project. It was like a kind of technical exercise. It's not, we don't pass like 2 months doing. It's like, so it's the beginning and it's a technical thing. They choose, because usually they choose like a draw that they do, and they have to understand by taking a picture from Instagram or taking a draw from illustration to translate these to go to tapestry, the way of doing, the way of imagining the lines. It's a little bit different. So the exercise is this. It's a technical exercise, like 2-3 weeks in the beginning, and just for that. But you also have the same pictures there when you have the two, yes.
We did start, I think there is an interesting parallel with textiles and architecture, and for us it was very interesting the scaling up, because the materiality, even if it was the same working with thread, in the end it was not thread, it was ropes, it was very big panels, but we started with a sketch, really just drawing on a building facade, and this transformation, the material transformation into was very important to start with a sketch and then bringing it into its real dimension and the real material constraints, which must be very different, of course, for a tapestry.
Yes,
and
but you have, in the beginning, you show some examples with the different stitches from tapestry. I think in the first picture that you showed.
Yeah, the embroidery,
yes.
the research that we did,
yes.
and how to bring this in a totally different format, and the concessions that we made, and accepting also that we would depart quite far from the original textiles. I mean, I can talk about this in detail if you want, also later.
I just a little bit add about that. Yesterday, actually, I was in exhibition of our really well-known Lithuanian tapestry weaver, Feliksas Jakubauskas. He is awarded in a lot of different countries, biennials of textiles, and I just wanted to ask him how he's doing his sketch, how he is doing his carton. And he's celebrating 70 years already now. And then he said that, you know, Monica, I am just drawing with a pencil, of course, in the scale how I need to weave the tapestry. But and I said, you are not putting colors, because this is amazing, nice colors in his tapestries. And he said, no. I am improvising all my life, because it is a concept of my doing, that I am not just a weaver, I am not just a craftsman, I am artist. So that's why I need to left me a space for that, to do even this work what I know the best in my life. so just to note about that, the principle.
Okay, I wanted to share a bit what is the practice in my school with the textile department, and of course in the beginning, in the 11th year, because in the 10th year they choose the area where they want to go, and the 11th year they choose textiles or other things. And in the 11th year, we begin with, it's not really a cartoon, it's a drawing where they can interpret, and there is, the methodology is a bit attached to the idea that young students, they don't know the technique, and they don't know what they want, and they don't know what. So this first cartoon, it's a bit a kind of game. They play with sometimes, for instance, they paint a large piece of paper, and then they cut it and they rebuild it in another way, so that they can remount and that they can make a composition. And then, for instance, they open a little window in a piece of paper, and they try to fix a part of this drawing that has already been distracted in some way, right? And this is when and then there is a kind of cartoon that's going out, and we do the traditional way. We weave in the opposite of we don't weave it in how do you say that in English? No direito, fazemos do avesso. Trabalhamos no avesso. Like exactly like in Gobelin. Yeah, exactly, with a mirror. We can have a mirror. But then in the 12th year, the project is done in another way. They begin with the materiality. They do little parts of the work, the idea that they have. They do little maquette, and they draw, and they redo, and they draw, and they redo, and the drawing is not the beginning. Sometimes it's the end.
Yes.
It's the end, and it's
It's the same.
and it's also the perception of the plasticity of the work that they have done with the textiles, and we have noticed that this is a good way for them to understand, because if they begin with the project in the first is the project, no, it's they don't have any idea of what to do, or well, they have some ideas, but they don't have the technical skills to materialize these ideas. So they are materializing the ideas after they touch the materials, and they construct with the materials, and that's
It's
the
not
way.
so. It's very similar.
Yeah.
We start with the materiality after the. Because I don't know if there are some misunderstanding, but because I say in the 50s when the class arrived, they work with cartons. Today it's only like a little exercise. This is completely different. Of course, they want that it extract new materialities. In spite, I finished with the kombucha textiles, paintings, whatever. But exactly the same. We can ask himself, this is necessary to do the carton? Maybe not, but sometimes, you know, the construction of image for us in some your generation, it's the building of by painting, by tapestry, whatever. It's very common. But today the students they like to do this kind of exercises because they are constructing a material image. So when you go with them, you understand that it's an important exercise for him, and they start to dominate the materiality in like 2-3 weeks.
More questions?
Well, we are right on schedule, and if we don't have more questions, I propose the final synthesis of Janice. If you could come here, thank you so much for your participation. Thank you. And
Apparently, I have to sit here because I was invisible to the YouTube audience. I quite like being invisible, so I like being a ghost in some regards. So yesterday, I was very brief. I shall be brief again because, as you know, I'm always reluctant to do a summing up because what is there to sum up? It is simply, as we started with a lot of C's, an ongoing conversation. It's been a wonderful day and a half, and again, thank you to all the organizers, but also to the audiences who have come from far and wide and internationally and intergenerationally. That's very important. But I had a moment of my own reflection, 1968, you see, it was the year of revolution in Europe. And it seems to me we are at this moment now. And I saw an exhibition in London, I am a Londoner, called When Attitudes Become Form. I think we can also translate that into my own Polish experiences of making something out of absolutely nothing. But of course, there's always something. There is never a nothing. And so from 68, I was thinking about how we've engaged ourselves in different acts of becoming in terms of different species or materialities or possibilities, which then becomes acts of opening. And acts of opening are using all the words so many people have used in terms of openness to people, to minds, to cultures, to acts of trust and generosity, to have those kind of compositions, which we've heard about again today. Compositions that also allow us to think about how we compose communities, neighborhoods. This word that has also resonated so strongly about how this is an excavation process. There is always something. There is never nothing. And how that allows the possibilities within divergent and diverse and différance communities to begin to think about being in one place, the specificities of place, the geo-humanities of space, across space, perhaps across time, slow time, fast time, but always thinking through the timing of the time. And in that timing, the kinds of exchanges, the leaving, the rethinking or remaking, as we've been reminded of the Contextile 2022 theme of remaking. But that kind of working through what made old knowledges old into the researches of new constructions and new collaborations, or rekindling those that might have been slightly dormant, leads us to think about those non-formal institutions, those actions, those emergences of significantly what's called intangible heritage, those who make the histories by undoing the history of domination. And that becomes a different kind of making of curricula, of stories, those ghosts that haunt the machine. And so we have a flip down, a turn down, a rethinking of the selvages of the autonomy of knowledge, from down, from the top, to the pressure from the bottom to the top, hence 1968. And I think we heard about rhythm and rhizome go together. Not just because it's about flattening, but it's the horizontality of moving rhythmically across time, across a wave, across a kind of fixture of a walk, which is why weaving is such a powerful symbol and a powerful metaphor. And in that, those knots, and in fact the nodes, lead us to the materiality of code within that which may be thought of as a digital excavation. And I think this is one of the richnesses of thinking about how many of the art institutions in Europe were actually founded by artists, because they had something to say and something to push, and something that wasn't going to be ossified, unfortunately, into the archaeological distances of thinking that everything was in its place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janice. Thank you so much, everyone, to come here. End of the session of this textile talk. and we hope to see you in the future. Have a nice lunch, and 2:30 we have the exhibition, the guided tour by Janice, Aurenzio, and Lala. Thank you so much. Bye.